Everybody who joined while we were running through?
Me.
Michelle.
Hi,
Sorry, Michelle.
No worries. I'm Michelle Jacobs from HR. I've worked on business objects quite a bit from the staffing side in developing some business objects. But I've also been invited by Ashraf to this meeting because I'm getting some exposure to the student side of the data. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody. It's really great to meet so many people, even if virtually, and sometimes these things overlap and sometimes they're distinct, but it's I think everyone's interested in building more of a community of practice around business objects and figuring out what it can do, being an incredibly powerful platform. So I'm going to hand over now to Ruan, who is going to jump straight in and run through a quick demo of the data dictionary. Go ahead, Ruan.
Cool, thanks, Stephen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Yes, yeah, we can see it.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so I'll try to be brief, but feel free to ask questions as we go along. I'm just going to do a quick demo of what is available, what the data dictionary is, and how you might use it. So it's an online web app available at the address that was posted in the chat earlier. And the idea here was to use the metadata from business objects and possibly a few other systems and display it in a sort of modern UI that would allow us to quicker find information. So it's not a crash course on business objects as much as it is what is available in business objects. So just jumping right into the data dictionary, the two main components I'll focus on is the universes and the documents. So I think most people might be familiar with what a universe is, but just a quick sort of definition of it is that it's a data mart or set of fields from specific business units. So if you think about something like PeopleSoft, that has a lot of different types of information in it. Admissions data might be a universe, where student records might be another universe, and student financials might be a different universe. That is how all the reports on business objects get their data from. They use a universe, and it's really just a semantic layer with field definitions, joins, and sort of complex things in it. Documents here refer to specific reports that are available on the business objects platform. So reports that you might run on a daily basis or schedule. That's what the documents here refer to. So just going into the universes, we can click on more information, and a list of universes that are available will be displayed. And as Stephen said, we'll focus on student records and admissions mostly because those are the most up to date in terms of metadata. So I'll just go in on student records. And here we get a universe view that gives us a split between, on the left-hand side, you'll see a bunch of information, metadata about the specific universe. You'll see the description. You see who might be the possible data owner here. This information is a bit out of date because it's not captured on a system anywhere, so we tend to manually update it as time goes by. You see some information about the required access rights that you might need to use this universe. In addition to that, you'll see some metrics, the amount of fields that are available in this universe, how many of those fields have descriptions percentage-wise, and how many documents reference a specific field from this universe. Okay. On the right-hand side, we list all the fields available in the universe. To make it a bit more easier to navigate this, if you know you're looking for a specific field, you can type it in here and it will filter it out for you to all the possible matches. Once we know that we are looking for a specific field and we filtered this list, we can go into a field and get a field-specific view. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with something like an PeopleSoft employee ID. And here we list the metadata that is saved on the universe for this specific field. So we give it description. We have some properties that are more relevant to developers for us, like the IDs and paths. We also give a list of example values that might constitute this field. And the bottom section here is something we've added recently. It's still in a work of progress state, but it's an attempt to trace the field back to a source system. So in this case, we can see that the employee ID field in this universe comes from this PeopleSoft table and that field. In addition to that, there's a lineage trace, sort of a tree graph here that shows us where this field might be used in our ETLs. Again, more useful for developers, but it might be interesting for people to see. In addition to that, we display a list of reports that use this specific field. So it's a direct reference. So all of these reports use the employee ID in some way or another. And you can see it's quite a number of reports. It's self-explanatory because it's a very common field. I think that's it for the universe sort of view. Again, just going back then to the data dictionary and going into the document view, we get a list of all the available documents or reports on SAP Business Objects. There are, I think, in total 700 odd reports. And if you go into, and again, if you have a specific report that you might know of, you're not sure where it is, or you want to see metadata about the report, you can type in here and you'll get a filtered list of the matches. So I'm just going to choose a report that I know here. Once you go into the document view, again, you see metadata about the specific document that is saved on Business Objects. You get things like the description, people that authored it, the last time it was updated, if it's scheduled. In addition to that, you get the path. You also get a link to open it in Business Objects. So if you were interested in doing that, you can click the link. It'll take you to Business Objects. You would need to authenticate at this point, but it will take you straight to the document so that you don't have to navigate through the folders and so forth. I'm going to reset that. I'll run this. And there you get your report. Okay, pretty straightforward. So going further into the document view, we get a list of fields that the data providers for this document use. So those are the queries that have been defined on the report. We list all the fields here. And once again, you can drill into a specific field and go to the field view, where you can see information about the field and where else it might be used. Going down, again, this information is not necessarily would be that interesting to users, but for developers, it's a lifesaver because it gives us the formulas, what the formulas are made out of, and the qualifications and extra information that we might need. In addition to that, there's a document usage chart that utilizes the order data from Business Objects in an attempt to see how documents might be used. This information is still sort of work in progress as well because the order data is quite complex and it's not always available for all the documents. And as far as that documents go, I think that is it. Other than that, there is a global search that searches on field names, variable names in reports and report names. So if you were interested to find a throughput report, you can search there and it will show you all available matches. There are a ton of available metadata fields, so we've only chosen to search on a few, but it can always be expanded on. And from here on, you once again can drill into the specific view. So if you search for something like a term code, you'll get all matches for term codes, including fields and any reports. Okay, and if you want to, if you know that you're looking at a specific term code from a specific universe, you can again just click on it and it will take you directly to the field view. Okay, I think that's it from my side. That's just a quick demo of what the data dictionary is and how you might find it useful to use. A lot of the information that we display is very useful for us in terms of tracking down development issues or data integrity or quality issues that we might have. Instead of having to go to the ETL jobs, we can just use an online platform that's always available to us. And it's really, for us, it's been a lifesaver. Stephen, back to you. I don't know if there are questions or anything, but that's it for my side for a quick demo.
Great, thanks, Ron. So maybe just leave your screen shared there so you could show more things if questions come up. So I'll talk briefly about the role of the data dictionary in the DAS work to give you some sense of how it's valuable, particularly. And some of it might look a bit technical, but don't worry too much about this. It is an amazing piece of work, and it's been, every time I see it, there's some new feature added to it. So it is really an extraordinary resource. So when we first started working with the data in business objects from an analytics point of view, dating back to about 2018-19, it was in request to some projects doing analytics, and the requests would come in often relatively in quite vague terms or not precisely defined terms. So, you know, students with a home language of English, for example, like, so what does that mean? What data is captured? Where does it come from? And we sort of were interested in what business objects could do. And the sort of first thought was, oh, well, we can get access to it and we can write business objects reports to answer these types of queries that we get in. And that was really simpler than it turned out to be a slightly naive view, I guess. So there are sort of two barriers to being able to do that easily. So one is there's a sort of familiarity with the actual report writing interface, which Ron and a couple of other people are real experts at, and one can learn how to do it, but it is something where there's quite a lot of depth to doing it. And the second barrier was really about understanding the actual data at the level of what data was there and where does it come from and what does it mean. And that is really a sort of gap that has to be bridged before one can come up with a good specification, even for a report, even if somebody else is writing the report, because you don't know what's there, you don't know what to ask for, and equally, if you ask for something vague, you're going to get back a lot of questions about what exactly you're looking for. So this is particularly, from us having worked with student data, particularly the case for academic administration, which is quite complex when you get into it. And so if you say something like, I want to report on first year students, well, what is a first year student? Is it their academic year of study equals 1? Is it their midterm? Is it something else? What actually captures being a first year student? And therefore, what does that mean for the report that you're writing? So the data dictionary is a way of carrying through those definitions and making them discoverable so that firstly you can find out exactly what is in there, and secondly what the different fields actually do mean. Like, what is this thing that is academic year of study, for example, is one of those which is known to people whose job is working with that every day, but if you're slightly outside that, you may not really appreciate what it actually means, and therefore you might produce some request or report that is sort of misleading. And we have to be very careful about that in the analytics and student data side. So the main benefit of the data dictionary has been to allow us as a project to much more quickly identify what type of reports and visualizations and things we could get. So it's enabled Kende, for example, to be the interface between somebody coming from the academic side with a relatively broadly defined query and then match that up with what's actually available in the data dictionary. And in some cases, there might be existing reports that need no extra work. You just need to know that it is there and it exists. And in another case, it might be, okay, we need these particular attributes across these universes. So I will open it up for some questions quickly before we get into how we can expand the data dictionary. And I will just say the data dictionary is not taking any account of access and permissions. So it's a view of everything that's available, but accessing the data dictionary itself, which anybody on campus can do, doesn't give you access to the underlying reports. So you would still need to have the right authorization in business objects to run the reports that you might discover through the data dictionary. And there is an existing mechanism and system for that. So just kind of leave that as an aside question. But one of the very valuable things is that the business objects allows pulling in data from different universes. So you might have thought, you might not have been aware of data in other universes that you could use in your reports to create a richer view of some particular aspect of the university. And the data dictionary can let you discover that that is there and then proceed down that pathway of figuring out if that's the right type of report that you need. So let me take some questions quickly. Well, not quickly. I can take 10, 15 minutes on. Sure, Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks. I know the HEMIS universe and the student record universe are separate, and it kind of makes sense in one aspect, but in others it is essentially the same data. But as you said, you know, just the definition. So let's say, what is a student? In HEMIS terms, it's a lot more exacting than just a student number or an EMPL ID on the database. You know, you have to be enrolled on a course, and you have to be enrolled on that course by a census date. So you might get different results if you're querying students from the student universe as opposed to the HEMIS universe. That was just one kind of observation, but possibly some reflection of that in the data dictionary is important. That's the one observation. And then the second was just a question. So how does this work? How does this get updated? So let's say I create a new field in the student system. Is it manually added to and maintained on the data dictionary? That's it.
Okay, we are going to come to that next, but short answer is, yeah, this is metadata that's in the data dictionary that can be imported into it, and systems and business units would have these definitions. And what you're trying to do in this discussion and project is the processes and activities to kind of bridge the gap so that the domain-specific business definitions find their way into the data dictionary. Sean, did you want to respond to that? Get your hand up. Otherwise,
thanks, Stephen. I think you've answered it. So Jeff, just in terms of the HEMIS definitions, we very much come to you to provide the detailed information around the HEMIS fields. But if a field does get automatically added to your universe, it'll pull into the data dictionary. Obviously, it will have no definition. So I think that's what a lot of this meeting is about, is to get the universe owners to help us populate those detailed definitions. And that example of a student is, you know, for the HEMIS one, you could put in that detail that you need to be enrolled in a course, etc., etc. So yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, and those subtle distinctions are absolutely essential to be reflected, particularly if somebody else is coming along and saying, okay, well, I got this data from HEMIS, but they're not aware of that. And so, and someone says, okay, why does your HEMIS data not match my student records data? And one should be able to look at the data dictionary to see those differences in definition that would account for that. Ashraf?
Thanks. The question from Jeff, and the question of what is a student wouldn't naturally come up, except when you're looking at the number of students that there are, and then why there are differences between what PeopleSoft would give as operational data versus HEMIS data. And so I'm wondering what or how the data dictionary project also would interface with other forms of training. Jeff and Sean, I know, work in a specific area that looks at HEMIS. It's got certain rules, but how does the training in terms of that particular role, how can it dovetail with the data dictionary? Because I mean, HEMIS has got very specific rules on certain things, and it's useful to know those, but I wouldn't have naturally thought that that would pull through to the data dictionary in terms of the fields, unless it is specified from that area. And so my thinking is that, I mean, there is a lot of metadata in the HEMIS help files. I don't see any of the metadata complete in the HEMIS universe or the HEMIS universe section of the data dictionary. And so it really would, my question is really, how can we interface the data dictionary training with the training that IPD might provide for new staff in terms of understanding the differences between HEMIS and operational data? I mean, Jeff also does some training in terms of HEMIS and understanding HEMIS, so that this data dictionary could form part of whatever Jeff also trains people on. Sorry, I don't know if I'm just wondering where it interfaces with other forms of training and other materials on PeopleSoft and or HEMIS.
Okay, thanks, Ashraf. And we might not be able to answer that question today, but it is a good one. I'm just also showing this universe view here where some universes have descriptions. So this has been put in for the ones we've worked on, which is admissions. Okay, we don't have much on student records, but there's an opportunity here to say, for example, HEMIS and the frequency that the data is updated, and a link through to the HEMIS's own data dictionary, which partly inspired this work, and to kind of give the context of this institutional data, and that mostly you might want to be using student records instead, but this is the purpose of that particular universe. And then as one added ones there, this metadata would be more complete. So you know, we're not making assumptions again around what any of these universes exist to do, but having good descriptions of them in business objects seems a universally good thing. Forgive the pun, sorry. Jeff and Cecil and Sean, I don't know if you want to respond more.
Okay, no, I didn't really have anything. I was going to kind of try and respond to Ashraf. I agree with him. I mean, we need to align the understanding that people have, but also within the context of what they're using. Most the HEMIS users use student records operational data in the first instance, but there's no reason. I mean, this is a really comprehensive view, and it will clear up a lot of fog, I think, along the way. So yeah, I agree, Ashraf. We need to somehow make people aware of this resource because it'll help in all areas. Anyway, nothing more to add.
Thanks, Cecil.
Thanks, Stephen. Just a question from my side. I just want to check my understanding in terms of, I think Sean spoke about definitions. Would the same then apply to staff information? Specifically, for example, I'm working with employment equity, and there are specific definitions, for example, for South Africans, and I'm using the term foreign national as per the Act, foreign nationals. So that also then integrate from the dictionary into the system used to provide the information on staff with the the categories of staff.
I mean, the short answer is if the information exists in business objects from a source system like SAP, and there's a field in SAP that says what your status is for employment equity purposes, and that flows through into business objects through an ETL, then there is a field there, and the data dictionary here is about describing that field. So okay, these are in finance. I'm totally not familiar with anything outside. It's just student data, but I imagine somewhere there is HR data. Okay, these are student records. Maybe we need to go to documents. So one of the HR people give an example here. So one of the goals is to make it searchable as well, that you have enough metadata that you search for something, you can find that source field and sort of know where to head to find the data you're looking for. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Stephen, I just wanted to say that the specific field Cecil is referring to does not exist within SAP. It's only a calculated field within business objects.
Okay. And then in that case, the role of the data dictionary can be to show what the calculation is. So if it shows up in a report, then there's a calculation of formula, unless it's in the ETL. Rowan could flow through from that, but largely one would want to be able to discover it and see a definition, if it's a source field or if it's a calculated thing in a report that's showing up somewhere.
Can I follow up? Sorry, my hand's not up. Can I follow up, Stephen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So that's something it's something we must look into, Zoe, or I mean, from that point of view, to make sure that the definition is included, or is it something else? I just want to clarify whether it's something that the process owners must advise on. Thanks.
Run! What's happening? Like fixes. Okay, so we got as far as searching for ethnic, and we have here ethnic origin name, for example. And so this is getting us into the right part of what we're looking at. So the number of reports around employment equity, for example, SAP HR reports, HRBPs, line managers. So this already does give you a sense of how that particular data might be used across the university, different functions that are in some way working with EE data. And so hopefully the process of describing these fields accurately can help to create consistency, or at least let people discover what is where and not duplicate work. Okay, any further questions? Well, then we can move through onto some specifics about how to actually add and improve metadata. Okay. Rowan, would you like to talk through what the process looks like right now to add metadata into a particular universe?
Sure. So because we're only basically displaying the metadata that's available on a universe, there's no systematic way to update that information. What we've done with student records and other universes is to extract a list of the fields available with their current descriptions, and just give that in Excel format to the people that could then potentially go and update those descriptions, send it back to us, and we on our side do a sort of a manual update. So it's not ideal, but also considering that once it's in, they won't change frequently. So it's sort of effort in the beginning, but once it's in there. So that's the process, is to extract the data from what we currently have with the descriptions that we currently have and pass that along to somebody who could just, sit through Excel and add descriptions and send that back to us. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, so that is a process that rests with each universe owner, in the sense of the owner of the data, who would have or know the authoritative definitions of the different fields, because you own the source data that is going into business objects in that sense. So how we did this for student records in particular is we identified in the project somebody with specific experience in the domain who had some time to work through the definitions, and then Rowan exported a list of all of the fields, and then it was a process of matching that up to existing documentation, such as in the SSS documentation, which is quite extensive and documents essentially the academic administration terms and processes and what they will mean, and then putting that into the spreadsheet. And then what you see now is the result of having imported that. And then it automatically does all this cross-referencing with which reports they show up in. So broadly speaking, that would be the process for a universe owner to start improving the data dictionary, is to find someone who can work on this and then to liaise with ICTS on the actual mechanics of doing it. We have a point here about roles and responsibilities. So I want to clarify that from the DAS data analytics project point of view, we have a particular interest in student records and admissions and the types of data that would flow through into possible uses for student analytics, but we're not involved in a whole lot of functional domains outside that, such as HR, for example. So we can, from the DAS project, provide resources in the sense of funding to pay people to do work to further improve the metadata, as there are opportunities for that in the student domain more broadly, essentially as a funding source. But again, the kind of authoritative sign-off of this rests with each individual universe owner. And then Sean and Ron, would you like to talk through ICTS's roles and responsibilities in particular in this process?
Yeah, so just from our side, we'll maintain the data dictionary, the infrastructure, make sure that there are no issues with it. In terms of populating the data, we can definitely provide extracts of, so maybe take HEMIS as an example. We can extract all the fields and records that are available in HEMIS, send it through to Jeff. Jeff, I know you've got, I think you get from the Department of Higher Education, the definitions of those fields, and if you just populate them in that spreadsheet, we'll take that spreadsheet back once it's populated and import it into the data dictionary. So I think, yeah, from our side, it's maintaining the technical infrastructure for the data dictionary, assisting with extracts of spreadsheets that can be populated, and then loading that data back into the data dictionary. Really, have I missed anything? I don't think so.
No, Sean, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So I would also like to say there's an important part of this process, which is preventing the data dictionary from becoming stale and out of date, which would undermine its purpose. So, and that process is really when something changes in the sense of a definition of a field or how it's used, or a new piece of institutional data, then that change needs to flow through to the data dictionary as part of the regular business process of the unit. So a good example is Karen just sent an email about academic year of study, and that definition has now been changed by Senate. And so that is an example of where that would update in academic administration, and faculty administrators would probably know that, but then it also needs to flow through to update a definition business objects. So there's kind of a responsibility from the business owner there to keep business objects up to date and make that part of the process of any business definition changing in that functional area. Karen, go ahead.
Thanks, Stephen. No, I think you've said everything that I just wanted to, and it was quite fortuitous that you had mentioned the term academic year of study. And it was precisely because it was a manual calculation and hugely unreliable and unevenly calculated that we moved to a system calculation. And we now use the PeopleSoft term, which is academic level. We did work with Jane in the IPD to make sure that she was satisfied from a data point of view that it was giving us the same metric or measure that we had previously tried to establish with the EOS. But I think it just struck me as you spoke that, you know, we had changed it on the business side, but we'd kind of lost sight of business objects. So thanks for that opportunity.
Right, and you know, it's an opportunity to move beyond the sort of people's colloquial understanding of some of what these things are, and so you get, you know, you get these circles of people who work with this every day and know the exact definition, and yet there might be academics or people in projects or something who just think, oh, EOS is this, but it's not. Ashraf.
Thanks. I'm looking at the list of reports that they are on that they are on the data dictionary, and I'm just wondering, when people have a change request to add a new report, if there's some sort of description of what the report is supposed to provide. And I'm looking at something called the well, it doesn't really matter what report, the throughput for cohort analysis. So the question is, do we have to give some sort of description for it? Because maybe for new reports, we can ask for a description that can then be used to populate a field that explains what the report is for in terms of the data dictionary as well.
That is a good point, and that is also an approach to deciding how to tackle the metadata question, because if you look at student records here, for example, we've got 29% coverage, which sounds small, but we did start with the fields that were referenced in the most heavily used reports. So, and what we've also done with some of the reports is write up quite detailed definitions and specifications of the reports. And so building in metadata description into report creation is a good approach, because it's a kind of incremental way of moving forward in this. So when you create a new report, you make sure that the metadata is described for each field that is constituted in the report. And then the report is also in some senses self-documenting. You don't need to like write all that separately, because it's going to all show up in some way. So the other thing I'll just say is that as a sort of business universe owner, your motivation for the metadata description might vary. So there are a couple of different outcomes or values of it. So one is just for accuracy. Another one might be to make it easier to develop reports. And this is particularly the case where you might hire new people or have turnover, or you want to build capacity. It makes it much easier to get people to work with business objects and create specifications for reports, or even develop reports directly if the metadata is accurate. So people don't need to start from scratch trying to figure out about everything about UCT, every single possible corner of the university, to understand what fields would need to go into a report. Okay, so Fatima, do you want to speak to that quickly? Right, so you've got a detail.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, so as a standard practice for all our finance reports, we've got a parameters page. We first of all list what the report is all about. So remember, these reports that we have are going to the non-finance staff, so all the fund holders. So it's basically, to put it in layman's terms, what the report is about, what they can expect from it, and then also to give a definition of the different columns that appear in the report. So once again, it's to make sure that the non-finance users out there know what we talk about when we're talking about a vendor or a customer or a purchase order, etc. So these are standard in all our reports. It's got the parameters page, and then it's got the detail that follows. Okay, thank you, Stephen.
That looks excellent, and I think everybody can benefit from that discipline. And I think also if you have auditors show up, or you just want to be, accuracy in being better understood across the university. Sean.
Thanks. I think Fatima makes a good point. If that maybe our developers, when they get that parameters page, we can just update the data dictionary at the same time. If there's no definition there, so that will definitely help going forward. I see Rowan also has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's a very nice initiative, but just remember that's not going to be available because it's data on the actual report. So it's not going to be something that we can automatically do. But if it becomes a sort of practice that people do it, we can always copy the descriptions from that page and put it in the report description. Just, yeah, thanks.
We need to wrap up in a few minutes. Well, I need to go and chair a selection committee, but the fourth point of this was identifying business champions who will liaise with DAS and ICTS. So this is more with ICTS, but specifically, if your takeaway from this meeting as a business owner or somebody involved in source data of a universe and you would like to take this forward and improve metadata in your resource, then the next step is to identify somebody to run this process from your side, and then I think contact Sean and take it from there in getting that process kicked off. I know ICDS has just gone through a process of updating the owners of the universes, which is also helpful to know who is actually responsible for the different universes. So right, so Cyan, there's a question in the chat. Okay, the linkage of data into Power BI. I think that is a question to discuss with the team, ICTS team. So Power BI is kind of a downstream reporting mechanism. There are other ways to do that, to do similar things. So it's about, firstly, just choice of reporting tool, interactive dashboards, reports, how you want the data to come out. And then secondly, it is possible to create reports or interactive dashboards that draw on data across multiple universes. It does need the right consent and permissions and considering data issues around those at a non-technical level, but it is possible. But I think, again, Sean and Ron can provide direction in the mechanism. So before we wrap up, any last question? I'm also, if anybody else would like to stay on the line and talk to each other, you're very welcome. I just personally need to go with one. Okay, closing comments or thoughts? Has this been helpful?
Thank you. Yes, I think from our side, I think there are certain things that we can get moving on, including those descriptions for reports that we may or may not be using already.
Great, excellent. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming, and yeah, it would be nice to find some way of keeping a community around business objects alive and thriving at UCT, because we have a lot to learn from each other. Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone. Bye.